Rahman, a self-made Malaysian millionaire celebrated for his wealth and influence, and Aisha Malik, a struggling single mother whose life was quietly devoted to survival, were worlds apart. But a secret affair would draw them together in ways neither could control. Their hidden connection, forged in stolen moments and silent promises, seemed harmless at first, offering escape for Haris and hope for Aisha. Yet as his wedding anniversary approached, the delicate balance of secrecy and desire snapped, setting in motion a chain of betrayal, fear, and ultimately, a murder that would shatter lives and expose the deadly consequences of forbidden love. She lived far from the glittering skyline that defined the millionaire's world. In a modest apartment tucked between aging buildings, the single mother built her days around survival rather than ambition. Each morning began with responsibility, balancing work schedules, childcare, and constant financial pressure. Life had taught her to be cautious, yet exhaustion often softened her defenses. She carried the weight of past disappointment, having learned early that stability could disappear without warning. Her connection to the wealthy businessman came unexpectedly through a small professional arrangement that promised extra income. At first, his involvement seemed practical and respectful, offering support that felt rare and reassuring. He appeared attentive and understanding, qualities she had long been deprived of. Slowly, the relationship moved beyond its original purpose, forming a private bond she never planned to seek. The attention filled emotional gaps she had learned to ignore. Unlike his public life, their interactions remained hidden and carefully controlled. She became accustomed to secrecy, believing it was necessary to protect both their lives. Over time, hope replaced caution. She imagined a future where her child would no longer struggle, where stability could finally exist. Each gesture of generosity reinforced her belief that she mattered beyond convenience. Yet her world remained fragile. While he returned to luxury and admiration, she returned to silence and waiting. Doubt crept in during lonely nights, though she pushed it aside, trusting the promises implied through actions rather than words. Unaware of the forces shaping his decisions, she failed to see the imbalance forming between them. What began as support had quietly transformed into dependence, binding her future to a man whose life she could never fully enter. The relationship slowly shifted into something far more dangerous than either of them had anticipated. What had once felt controlled and manageable began to grow complicated as emotions deepened. The single mother no longer viewed the connection as temporary support. Time, attention, and shared secrets had created expectations that could not easily be erased. Her attachment strengthened with every hidden meeting and quiet promise suggested through actions. For the millionaire, the affair had started as an escape from routine and pressure. It offered excitement without responsibility, a separate world untouched by public expectations. But as her dependence increased, the sense of control he once felt began to slip. He realized that her emotional investment carried risks he had never planned for. The secrecy that once protected him now felt like a tightening trap. Signs of strain became impossible to ignore. The single mother wanted reassurance, stability, and a future that went beyond secrecy. She began holding onto evidence of their connection, financial records, personal gifts, and traces of their time together, not as threats, but as emotional security. To him, those traces represented exposure. Each reminder of the affair increased his fear of losing everything he had built. The imbalance of power became clear. While he could step away into wealth and respect, she remained emotionally and financially tied to him. Her vulnerability gave him influence, but it also created danger. He began to view the relationship not as a choice, but as a liability. Anxiety replaced desire, and calculation replaced affection. As pressure mounted, his focus shifted from maintaining the affair to protecting his public identity. The bond that once felt thrilling now carried consequences he could no longer control. Without realizing it, both were moving toward a point where secrecy alone would no longer be enough to hold their worlds together. As the weeks passed, the connection between them grew heavier and more intense. What once felt exciting now carried emotional weight that neither could ignore. The single mother began organizing her life around brief moments of attention, adjusting her routines and hopes to fit into the narrow space she was given. The secrecy no longer felt romantic. It felt like a burden she carried alone, quietly shaping her expectations for something more permanent. She started to believe that patience would be rewarded. Small signs of commitment were interpreted as proof that the relationship was evolving. The idea of being hidden began to feel unfair, especially as her sacrifices increased. Her emotional investment deepened, and with it came a growing need for certainty. She wanted safety for her child and a future that did not rely on silence and waiting. For the millionaire, the emotional shift triggered unease. He noticed the change in her dependence and felt the boundaries closing in. The affair was no longer separate from his real life. It demanded time, attention, and reassurance he could not freely give. The risk of discovery felt closer, and the consequences appeared larger with each passing day. He became more guarded, measuring every action and limiting contact. This distance only intensified her anxiety. She feared being discarded once she was no longer convenient. The imbalance between their worlds became undeniable. He had everything to lose, while she had built her remaining hopes around him. Tension replaced comfort. What bound them together was no longer affection, but fear on both sides. She feared abandonment, and he feared exposure. Their secret connection, once hidden in shadows, had become a fragile structure strained by expectation and control. Without realizing it, they had reached a stage where one mistake could shatter everything, setting events in motion that could never be undone. As the wedding anniversary drew closer, pressure settled heavily on the millionaire's life. The date symbolized more than a personal milestone. It represented status, loyalty, and the success he had spent years displaying to the world. Preparations intensified, with planners, business partners, and media attention surrounding the upcoming celebration. Every detail was designed to reinforce the image of a perfect marriage, leaving no room for error or scandal. At the same time, the single mother sensed a shift she could not ignore. Contact became shorter and less frequent, and reassurance felt distant. The approaching anniversary amplified her fears of being erased once the public display of commitment was complete. She began to worry that her place in his life was temporary and easily replaced by appearances and obligation. The silence between moments of contact grew heavier. The contrast between their realities sharpened the tension. While he planned an extravagant evening to celebrate his marriage, she faced uncertainty and emotional isolation. The secrecy that once felt necessary now felt suffocating. Her desire for acknowledgement became stronger as the anniversary approached, fueled by the belief that time was running out. She felt invisible, yet dangerously close to a truth that could destroy him. For the millionaire, the situation became a calculated risk. The anniversary was a test of control, one he believed he had to pass flawlessly. Any disruption could raise questions he was not prepared to answer. The affair had shifted from a private escape to a threat timed at the worst possible moment. Fear began to outweigh emotion. As the date neared, both lives moved toward collision. The celebration meant honor and stability for him, but potential abandonment for her. The growing tension hung silently between them, shaping decisions neither fully understood. What should have been a joyful milestone quietly transformed into the countdown to a dangerous. The night of the wedding anniversary arrived with the city glowing in celebration. Luxury venues lit up, music echoed through grand halls, and the millionaire stood surrounded by admiration and attention. To the public, the evening symbolized love, success, and stability. Carefully planned details unfolded exactly as intended, masking the tension beneath the surface. Few could imagine that while one world celebrated, another was on the brink of collapse. Miles away, the single mother spent the evening alone in her apartment. The silence felt heavier than usual, charged with unanswered questions and fear. Her surroundings showed signs of restlessness, as if she had been pacing, waiting for clarity that never came. The secrecy that once defined her role now felt unbearable, pressing against her sense of worth and security. Later that night, the atmosphere shifted violently. Neighbors reported unusual sounds and movement, followed by sudden silence. By the time authorities arrived, the apartment had become the scene of a brutal crime. The single mother was found dead. Her life ended in a way that suggested desperation rather than chance. The contrast between the city's celebration and the tragedy unfolding in the quiet building was stark and unsettling. Investigators quickly realized the timing was not random. The murder occurred during the hours when attention was focused elsewhere, when alibis could be carefully constructed. The scene revealed signs of a struggle, pointing to someone the victim likely trusted. Nothing appeared stolen, ruling out a simple robbery. As news of the death surfaced, the city's festive mood faded. The anniversary that symbolized unity now coincided with loss and violence. What had been a night of celebration became forever linked to a crime that would soon expose hidden lives, secret relationships, and decisions made under pressure, marking the beginning of a relentless investigation. The investigation moved quickly once the initial shock faded. Detectives began piecing together the single mother's life, examining her routines, finances, and recent behavior. It became clear that she had not been living in isolation. Bank records revealed regular deposits that could not be explained by her income alone. Expensive items in the apartment suggested outside support, pointing investigators toward a hidden benefactor. Surveillance footage from nearby streets provided the first major breakthrough. A luxury vehicle was seen entering the area on the night of the murder, its presence standing out in a neighborhood where such cars were rare. Though the license plate was partially obscured, the model and timing raised suspicion. The footage narrowed the list of potential suspects to individuals with wealth, influence, and access. As detectives dug deeper, they uncovered connections that had been carefully concealed. Phone records showed repeated contact between the victim and a single number, especially in the days leading up to her death. Messages and call patterns revealed emotional intensity and rising tension. The relationship was no longer hidden from those trained to find what others missed. The discovery of the affair changed the direction of the case. What first appeared to be a private tragedy now pointed toward motive. Investigators began to see the victim not as a random target, but as someone caught in a dangerous imbalance of power. The secrecy surrounding her relationship placed her in a vulnerable position. With each new detail, public curiosity grew. Whispers spread about a respected figure connected to the crime. The image of success and family devotion began to fracture under scrutiny. Investigators knew they were closing in on something bigger than a single act of violence. The case was becoming a test of whether influence could shield truth, or whether the truth would finally surface. As evidence continued to accumulate, investigators focused on reconstructing the final hours before the murder. Forensic analysis revealed that the attack was not spontaneous. The nature of the injuries suggested control and intent rather than chaos. The scene showed signs of restraint and familiarity, indicating that the victim had likely allowed her killer inside without fear. This detail narrowed the scope of suspects even further. Digital evidence became the most damaging thread. Phone data confirmed the last outgoing and incoming activity on the victim's device, placing her in contact with the same individual investigators had already identified as central to the case. Location tracking showed movement consistent with someone arriving and leaving within a narrow time frame. These findings aligned precisely with the window in which the crime occurred. Investigators compared this timeline with the public schedule of the millionaire. Officially, he was attending his anniversary celebration, surrounded by guests and cameras. However, security footage revealed gaps, moments when he was unaccounted for, when private transportation could have taken him elsewhere. The celebration that once served as proof of innocence began to look like a carefully constructed shield. Forensic specialists also uncovered trace evidence linking the suspect to the apartment. Microscopic fibers and biological material pointed toward close contact. Combined with the financial and emotional motive already established, the case tightened around a single narrative. The affair had reached a breaking point, and fear of exposure had taken control. What sealed the investigation was the realization that the crime fit a pattern of calculation. Every action appeared designed to delay suspicion. The evidence left little room for doubt. The man who had spent years controlling his image had underestimated the persistence of truth, which continued to surface piece by piece, refusing to stay buried. The conclusion of the case sent shockwaves through the city. As investigators finalized their findings, the image of the respected millionaire collapsed under the weight of undeniable evidence. What once looked like a life built on discipline and success was revealed to be sustained by secrecy and fear. The arrest marked the end of a carefully protected illusion and the beginning of public reckoning. Court proceedings exposed the full extent of the hidden relationship and the motive behind the crime. Financial dependence, emotional pressure, and the threat of exposure painted a clear picture of why the affair had turned deadly. The anniversary celebration, once admired as a symbol of loyalty, became a chilling reminder of calculated distraction. Public opinion shifted rapidly, replacing admiration with disbelief and anger. The single mother's story gained attention as well. Her life, once overlooked, became central to the narrative. Investigators emphasized her vulnerability and the imbalance of power that trapped her in secrecy. She was no longer seen as a hidden figure in someone else's life, but as a victim of manipulation and control. Her child was left without a parent, a silent consequence that deepened the tragedy. The millionaire's empire began to crumble. Business partners distanced themselves, investments collapsed, and public trust vanished. Years of reputation building were erased in a matter of days. The wealth that once protected him could not shield him from accountability. The case became a lasting reminder that status cannot erase truth. Behind carefully constructed images can exist dangerous secrets. In the end, one life was lost, another destroyed, and a city was left to reflect on how easily power can hide darkness, until it no longer can.